with Project SuperBloom. He's with Project SuperBloom, and they work on campaigning within like the California area, and they're one of the largest PACs within California. So I'll let him introduce himself and kind of introduce Project SuperBloom's message, and at the end there'll be a Q&A section for you all to ask him a couple questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm glad everyone could be on tonight, and excited to tell you a little bit about Project SuperBloom and the youth organizing that we do. So I am a co-founder and the finance director for Project SuperBloom. We're a PAC here in California focused on electing progressives to the California state legislature specifically. And we provide positions, and especially paid positions, to students to get involved in this work. So the big piece is kind of plugging them in directly to campaigns and kind of thinking about that barrier to entry, that is, students who have to otherwise do a part-time job or something else to help pay for their education. We want to be able to, give people that opportunity to get involved directly in politics. So we started in 2021 when I was a student in college. I graduated in 2022. So now, doing our best to uplift the next kind of generation of students and student organizers through our work. All of our team members are students, whether that's high school, community college, or college students across California, and do a lot of different work. So in 2022, we endorsed a bunch of candidates. We had several special election candidates, including several who won and are now serving in the California state legislature, which is really exciting. All of the candidates that we endorse are, progressive champions. Many of them are younger candidates. So, especially when it comes to elected office like the state legislature here in California, it's a pretty big district size and takes a lot to get elected. So excited to always work with younger candidates and more diverse candidates, more women, more people of color, and help kind of grow the block of progressive organizers that are being elected to the state legislature, who are excited to go govern with not only progressive organizing groups, but especially young people. So often we see that elected officials, they think about their constituents, right? But a lot of times they're only thinking about 18 plus constituents because that's who votes, right? Or they're not thinking about their, college community because maybe a lot of that community is registered to vote somewhere else. So we do a lot to make sure that our elected officials are prioritizing and getting engaged with students on campus, going to host town halls and get opportunities to be involved with students and understand their policy priorities more, because every other generation has elected representation in office, and young people don't. We need people who are willing to be advocates for us in those spaces. So we, as the PAC, focus primarily on making sure that not only do we elect people who are going to be sympathetic and excited to work with us, but that we engage existing elected officials, especially in the state legislature, to make sure that they're thinking about their young constituents as well, and kind of their policy priorities. As a PAC, we are primarily kind of a fundraising operation to be able to create the paid positions that I talked about. So we raise money from grassroots donors and from elected officials themselves who want to kind of invest in the work that we're doing. And the biggest piece of that is, creating the opportunity to, have a structure and be able to have a campaign on behalf of these candidates. So at the end of the day, organizing definitely takes money, and I'll kind of dive into a little bit more of kind of what that money means to a movement and kind of why it's important, especially as a progressive organization and as a youth-led organization. Money is super important because the existing political structure isn't built for groups like ours, right? So it's important to find creative ways to raise money and to engage donors, especially when so many of our members are young people who can't necessarily donate those big checks that we see, your typical super PACs or establishment candidates being able to get. So we do our best to raise the money to be effective and to be able to go out and endorse campaigns across California and directly plug in, young people to do paid opportunities. We also put a lot of our money into, some of the socializing and the organizing that we do on that front. I don't have to tell all of you that if there's an event that has food versus an event that doesn't, the event that has food is going to be, way more popular, because that's a big thing for students on whatever campus that is. So that's always a big piece of us is how can we feed the young people that we're bringing out to volunteer to these events. Transportation costs are always oftentimes a big issue. Not everyone has a car or access to really reliable public transportation. So how can we create, carpool systems and things like that to make sure that young people can get out to go campus for a campaign? One of the campaigns that we have endorsed and we're working on right now is Sade El Houari, running for state assembly in California, and her district includes USC. It's obviously a very, very big campus in Southern California. But one of the biggest things is not all students have cars there, right? Many come from out of state or even just out of LA. And kind of don't have that plugged in way to get around. And so when we do canvas events, we have the campaign, their different staff, as well as some of our allied organizations who help out with the campaign, like Working Families Party. We'll set up a carpool system where these adults, who are active in the campaign can come and help pick up, 4 or 5 students on the way to go canvas for the candidate. So that's another piece. And at the end of the day, all of these logistics and the food and the transportation cost money. But we also want to make sure that, as I said before, we're able to create, paid positions and get more students into the work who otherwise, don't have those opportunities to, which is, I know, a lot, something that you all are very passionate about and kind of creating that youth engagement, right? Diving a little bit more into fundraising, I think some of the key things to keep in mind is that, like I said, fundraising isn't really built for, young organizations and progressive organizations. We don't have, the kind of typical structures that many other establishment organizations do, and who are able to benefit from, the existing structures. So a lot of it is creating our own new donor database, right, of people who we know that are going to be supportive of our work and who want to engage. And so it's kind of one of the main pieces of fundraising is call time. We have the opportunity to, create lists of people. You can kind of do research and kind of create your own databases of donors based on kind of who donates to other political causes. We prioritize, candidates who have given to other allied organizations or allied candidates. People like Maxwell Frost, who's the first Gen Z member of Congress. We oftentimes feel like we have a lot in common with people who donate to him because they were excited to see that first Gen Z member of Congress. And then we kind of align with, people who donate to someone like AOC or to Bernie Sanders or to some of the kind of national progressive politicians. But those people are oftentimes, there's a lot of people who donate from California. So our biggest piece is, these people are already in California. They give to progressives at the federal level, but most times they have no idea what's going on at the state level. So we have that opportunity to, directly ask these, donors to invest in kind of a new kind of organization, something that they might not be used to. They may not know what the state legislature is or really what's going on there. And so it's an opportunity for education on that. It's an opportunity to, realize how important it is that we do have a progressive state legislature, because especially with, all the dysfunction of the federal government and the fact that, Democrats very seldom have a trifecta, California has the opportunities to do things on many of the issues that we care about in a way that the federal government isn't going to act on or prioritize. I think some of the best examples of that are climate change. A couple of years ago, Isaac Bryan led an effort in 2022 to pass SB 1137. That was a bill to mandate that no new oil wells can be built within 3,000 feet of homes, schools, hospitals, playgrounds. It's crazy enough that California doesn't have something like that because we allow our big oil companies to pollute people's backyards. And it took many years of organizing to get it. Democrats killed it for several years in a row. The moderate kind of centrist Democrats, some of them that we have in the state legislature. And we elected Isaac Bryan in 2021 to represent a assembly seat in LA. His district includes UCLA, which is a really cool organizing opportunity for us there. And then he led that effort in 2022, the year after he got elected, to pass that law. And that's something that, we can protect people directly right in our backyards here in California with state policy, whether that be climate change, in the renewable energy space, as we start thinking about kind of the offshore wind that we're developing in California. It's housing policy. Young people are concerned about housing prices, whether that's rent, and finding a place that is within a good commute for a job, but also thinking about eventually trying to buy a home. It seems so out of grasp for young people in California right now, and the state can really lead on that policy. The state of California also does a lot of leading on kind of criminal justice reform, on kind of transit and increasing opportunities for walking and biking and taking the bus. So there's all these kind of crucial things that the state of California does, and the list goes on, that our state legislature really has an impact on. And for many years, we've had some progressive representation, but there is always an opportunity to to grow that, because we have a Democratic supermajority here, and it's always, pretty much going to stay that way, is what people kind of would imagine. And so how can we make sure that we're electing leaders here who are going to be kind of uplifting that work? And we also have term limits in the state of California legislature. So they're only there for 12 years. And so there's a lot of turnover and opportunity. We don't have leaders like that we have in Congress who hold on to their seats and hold on to power for 40 plus years. It's a quick turnaround. So we always want to be helping to elect the next, younger person, the next kind of new leader to Sacramento. Going back a little bit to the fundraising, so there's kind of the call time aspect, and then there's events. We like to host great events like you all do with people from across the state. As a statewide organization, we do a lot of virtual events to be able to bring in people from different parts of the state. But we certainly also have opportunities to do in-person ones in some of our bigger hubs, especially on the campuses that we actively organize in. Places like I mentioned, like USC, UCLA, and some of the kind of community colleges that we've been active at over the past couple of cycles. And so fundraising events are a big way. We can tap into people like faculty, professors, teachers, school staff, who are obviously already on those school communities and are looking to uplift their students, but also just the broader community members. There's a lot of people in California who would be interested in supporting young people, but the biggest thing is that we need to be asking them that. A lot of times people think about asking for money, and it's really intimidating, especially as young people, to call someone you've never spoken to before and ask them to donate to your organization or to your candidate. But the biggest thing that I always kind of emphasize to people is that those people, especially so many who donate to a lot of different political causes, they're giving their money out. They want to invest in, a future for California, a future for our country that aligns with kind of their ideals and their vision. And so they're donating to that end to try and, make that investment and kind of give back. And so they're already donating. And so the biggest, thing is, why not to you, to your organization, to your candidate, that sort of thing. And the part of fundraising is really making a pitch. I often compare it to like sales, and what you're selling is your organization or your candidate to these people, and you're asking them to invest in a product and in a vision for the state of California, or kind of whatever level of office this is. Especially when you think about like kind of some of the local offices and local organizing, it's people who want to make their communities better. They want to see leaders, in elected leadership who are going to improve their cities and kind of make good lasting change. So fundraising is really about connecting with donors on that level and finding, what is motivating to them. I oftentimes, tell people it's easy to pick up the phone and want to explain to them for 10 minutes what your organization does or why it's important. But it's also a lot of listening. Fundraising is a lot of understanding what people's priorities are, and helping to, connect what you're hearing from them on the other line to what your experience is, to what your organization is doing, and why their contribution will be a direct benefit that aligns with not only their values and what they're hoping to accomplish, but it'll help your organization, be successful as well. So it's a lot of, taking that time to call people and really connect with them on the phone, on the fundraising space. And like I was saying, it's so important because things cost money, and it's important that we're creating the opportunities to invest in young people. Our political establishment churns through millions and millions, probably billions of dollars across politics. And so so much of that money goes into existing voter contact things and methods that don't work with young people. And the kind of national narrative is that young people don't vote, right? 18 to 35 in California is the biggest voting block. So of the different age groups they have, 18 to 35 is the biggest one when it comes to sheer number of registered voters. In California, we're really lucky. So many people get automatically registered when you get a license, things like that. So most young people are registered. That's not the kind of big challenge. But the even bigger challenge is getting them to actually turn out and vote, right? What's going to be motivating to them? And so much of our current kind of political system is not investing in ways that reach young people. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People say, well, we don't have the resources to try and focus on a low turnout voter group, right? You want to focus on the highest likelihood of voters. But if you don't spend any money communicating to the lower likelihood voters, they're not going to vote because they don't know that it's going on, or they don't know that there's a candidate that's representative of them. There's been some really great research by groups like Run for Something, which does kind of candidate recruitment on the national level, that shows that if young people have, another young candidate or a progressive candidate or a candidate who looks like them on the ballot, they are so much more likely to vote, than just kind of seeing kind of older kind of federal politicians, right, on their ballot. So we want to create those opportunities for young people to vote, and the biggest thing is investing in it. As I was saying, the kind of most money goes into television ads. It goes into direct mail to people's houses. It goes to canvassing neighborhoods and things like that. These are all voter methods that are, voter contact methods that are really great for connecting with voters. That's why people do it in politics. It's why it's a huge part of voter organizing. But young people aren't that likely to see some of these things. A lot of this advertising goes on cable TV. Obviously, young people do a lot more streaming than watching cable TV, and don't necessarily see those ads translate. Mail, obviously, young people, when you're going to college or wherever else, or even early on in your kind of post college life, you're either moving around a lot and don't have a steady address, or you're not registered to vote at where you are, and so that mail is never going to reach you in that district that you're in. Same thing with door knocking. No one's going and door knocking on college campuses, and so they're focused on a much more kind of homeowner and even kind of adult renter population when they're going and doing that. And so these kind of traditional voter contact methods don't reach young people. The things that young people need more investing in is digital ads, reaching people on social media with kind of targeted advertisements towards that age group. Snapchat now has kind of allowed political ads in a way that they didn't before, and many new kind of candidates and organizations are starting to advertise on Snapchat to reach, like I said, young people where they're at. So not only digital ads, but it's investing in relational organizing. Every young person has 40 classmates, and then they have their friends and their neighbors and their cousins, and whoever else these other people are. Young people are at a really key opportunity to organize those around them. I know when I was growing up and interested in politics when I was in high school, I always had kind of adult family friends interested in kind of what I had to say about politics, because when a young person is interested and engaged like that, people want to hear what you have to say. And so young people have a really unique opportunity to organize those around them, because we are so socially connected between our classes and our extracurricular activities and all of those things. And so we're really ingrained in our communities, and one person can motivate 50 plus people to vote, if they're given that opportunity to be an organizer, to be a youth voter organizer. And so investing in that and convincing campaigns that spending money that way is a good use of money, is a good return on investment, is a huge part of what we do. Because candidates and kind of the way the thinking goes is that it's not worth it. Grassroots and progressive candidates are always strapped for cash. They're always getting outspent, right? And so they're not necessarily willing to kind of go out and try new strategies. And so what we try to do is show the evidence that this is working. Get 30 people out to a canvas for them and say, see, young people are excited about you, but we need you to invest in that as well. So it's investing in that from our side, from Project SuperBloom, but it's convincing the candidates we work with that it's worthwhile as well, to spend their resources on really trying to engage young people, young voters, young volunteers, and even to have and hire and create these paid positions for young people. So that's kind of a long spiel on kind of finance and organizing and how it all relates together. I don't know if people have questions. I'm happy to keep talking if there aren't questions, but wanted to pause and give an opportunity to see if there's anything specific that people wanted me to talk about or further clarify or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I think it was super informative, especially with all of us being young people who are looking to see how we can get better involved in civic engagement and be advocates for other people representative of our values. And I know that we have a lot of online viewers who also watch like the recording after. So I think this is going to be a really great resource for all of them. So yeah, thank you so much. And I just wanted to pass it on over to Zion, Evelyn, and anyone else who may have some questions.
I actually have a question in regard, because you've said that you've, I guess, like spoken to a lot of representatives, and I guess with the existing system now, a lot of them tend to push aside a lot of these issues that Gen Z values so much. And for me, like, I always like to listen to podcasts on the side when I'm like bored. And I was listening to 538, and they're just talking about voter engagement and like the youth voting block. And there's this one speaker, and they're like, why are we focused so much on the youth vote? Because we know that they're not going to turn out. So this is why we shouldn't focus on certain issues. And I thought that was like really shocking to me, because I was like, housing and gun violence, and climate change, these issues that Gen Zs fight for so much, like it's really getting pushed aside even on national media. And so I kind of want to see like your experience, I guess, dealing with like sentiments like that, or like how we can really combat that, given that I guess Gen Z has been having like dropped volunteer rates from like Tufts research. I think it went from like 25% to 19%,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Like how do you address, I guess, criticism from the other side when it comes to youth involvement?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, I hear it from donors all the time who are like, I don't think it's worth giving my money to a youth-led organization. We hear it from elected officials. We hear it from kind of seasoned political strategists and people who, have spent their careers making those decisions on where money gets invested in politics. And, like I was saying, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. People who are concerned that young people aren't turning out, or oh, it's not worth kind of focusing on those issues because only Gen Z cares about it and they're not going to vote, are helping make that narrative themselves, right? If they're making that argument, that's they're, like I said, making it self-fulfilling at the end of the day. And so the biggest thing that we can do is say, well, when you go and you try and turn out all these other voter groups, right? Whatever kind of segments of the population that you're targeting, you're making a target and you're making an investment in turning those people out, right? If you're putting TV ads, you're putting an investment in older voters, people who watch more cable TV, who watch CNN and MSNBC, right? That's making an investment in those types of voters. And so it's all about these kind of decisions. And obviously, anytime in a campaign, you're weighing a lot of different things that are worth spending money on. And there are so many things that campaigns could always do that would be a better, I think, use of money than some things that they're taught are kind of the best strategies. But ultimately, it's about kind of pointing to the successes that groups like us have had, that groups like yours have had, of getting more students engaged, and saying, if we were able to do this on the scale that huge organizations already are able to operate at in the national political scene, we would be able to make that change that those groups are doing. But we're doing it at such a at the budgets that we have and at the scale that we are, we're having all this success and we're engaging all of these young people, but we don't have that invested, we're not being invested in to create more opportunities, to scale it up, to make that be a bigger project. And so I think pointing, to these people who are kind of pessimistic about young people's involvement and about young people's voter turnout, it's highlighting the opportunities that are successful, and that where there is high voter turnout and when there are young candidates on the ballot, and how that makes an impact, right? It's pointing out those key moments and those successes and being like, that's just a drop in the barrel of what we could be doing, and what young voters could be doing if we put in the infrastructure to help make that happen. I was just recently at a talk with the youngest state party chair in the country. Her name's Anderson Clayton out of North Carolina. She's, I believe, only 26 years old, and super big inspiration for me, and as someone who she really gets the importance of investing in young people, and in a swing state like North Carolina, she's been prioritizing that and uplifting her college Dems chapters and things like that. And one thing that she was talking about was, in North Carolina, they've had some restrictive voter ID laws, as a Republican led state in their state legislature. And so she was thinking about, how can we kind of get around some of these, and create opportunities that aren't just additional barriers to young people turning out to vote. And it turns out that there was a loophole in the voter ID laws that the Republicans passed that allows college student IDs to be used as a valid voter ID, because now North Carolina requires you to have a voter ID. And obviously, many young people, whether they're coming out from out of the state or whatever, they don't have a North Carolina ID, right? And so, but what they need to do is, you need to get it approved with your local registrar of voters, and then statewide, anyone with that college ID can do it. But there's like a panel that needs to approve this ID. And so she created this project with the college Dems in North Carolina, to try and email every single community college and college in North Carolina and get them, the administrators had to submit these IDs for approval, and get their administrators to submit the IDs for approval. And they got something like 70% of them submitted, and we'll have that valid for the general election coming up. And they're trying to flip North Carolina, right, from red to blue. And that's a key thing, that if Anderson wasn't that state party chair of North Carolina, I don't know if a single one of those IDs would have been approved. But that's a huge difference when we think about, students, community college and college students being able to turn out to vote, is just even having an ID that works, that allows them to vote. And so how investing in young people makes this difference. And I would say someone from the Biden campaign probably thinks that was really worthwhile that happened, right? That they can now have a stronger base of college voters to vote for, Biden in North Carolina. But they would have never thought at that granular level and thought about investing in young people in that way. And so we need leaders like Anderson and others across the country who are leading from a young person's perspective and making those investments. And I think that's a really good thing to point to, is like she's had record fundraising in the North Carolina Democratic Party because the past party chair, who was like an 80-year-old woman, just like was phoning it in. And she's fired up. Like she is so excited and has brought so much attention to North Carolina because the voters of the North Carolina Democratic Party decided to elect her. So I think it's important to highlight our successes for young people like Maxwell Frost and people like Anderson, because they point to the fact that these can be huge opportunities, but we can't get there unless we make those investments and kind of focus the attention on getting young voters into the mix. But I think highlighting the successes really kind of can take down some of the criticism that people are thinking that young people don't vote or aren't interested.
So thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more. I think that like it's so easy to, I guess, like dwell in the bad data. It's so important that we highlight, I guess, the successes of Gen Z, and that we can successfully mobilize people, and also to invest in candidates that resonate with us, that are Gen Z, that are youth, to kind of show that, we do have a voice and there's a future when it comes to people advocating for these issues that we so fervently like support and fight for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Eric?
I guess I can just ask a quick question, because I know a lot of our fellows on here, they aren't necessarily from California. I know PSB is really a California-centric PAC. So what would you say you recommend them to do if they're interested in getting involved in opportunities like these or other youth-led super PACs?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so we're on Twitter and Instagram and are constantly having opportunities. Obviously, we are very focused on California state elections, but we do, things like phone banking. And so if this all sounds interesting to you, I'd certainly encourage you to kind of follow our social media and kind of stay up to date. But on another scale, as what we can do nationally, it's get involved, with fellowships like this, right? It's find other young people and build organizing power together. Right? Because the number one thing that an organization like SuperBloom or any organization is, it's strength in numbers, right? And especially with young people, I think that's very much the case. And so find people to organize with, bring more people into the fold, talk to 5 friends next week about getting involved in politics, because there's a lot of people who either feel like they don't have the time or they're not the right person to do it, but we can bring in so many more people to organizing and to helping us, elect transformational leaders, and get involved in your local campaigns, wherever you are kind of across the country. There's important city council races, there's important county supervisor races, all the way up to, of course, Congress and presidential races. But there are so many great opportunities at those local races because you often have younger candidates, you have more progressive candidates, you have more candidates of color, people who have different lived experiences from kind of some of our federal politicians, right? And so you have people that are really community leaders and that you can connect with in a different way than federal campaigns. And you can also get so much more directly involved. These campaigns are smaller and more strapped for cash, especially, as progressive and young candidates, people running for office for the first time. And so there's opportunities to plug in and learn new skills and become integral part of that campaign team in a way that's so hard if you try and intern on a congressional campaign or a Senate campaign or things like that, where the scale is just so huge. And it's also just communicate with elected officials, reach out, figure out who your state representative is and your state senator, call their offices and let them know that, they should, if you're a student, I go to X school, like we would love to have the representative or the senator come to the school and learn directly from students, offer to, if you are in a political science class, ask your professor to reach out to local elected officials and to see if any of them are willing to come and speak to you. Find ways to get elected officials to prioritize young people in your own local circles, on your own campuses, in your own communities, because the more that we reach out to each of these candidates and we, emphasize how important it is that they're investing in and listening to young people, the more that spreads. But it just oftentimes, I've had plenty of interactions with elected officials who it didn't even cross their mind to go visit campuses. And as soon as like we were like that, you know, when we communicate with them, we say that's one of the first things you should do. They're like, oh, that's a no-brainer. Like I should be doing this every year. But they're not being asked that. They're not being told that. That's not the typical model of engagement. And so change that by, you know, directly asking these people, these elected officials and these candidates to come and listen to young people and to get them involved and think about them when they think about the policies that they're developing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric. I think a lot of times we get really caught up, especially with trying to get an internship at the most coveted political office and all, but more often than not, it is the smaller races that do make the most difference on the ground. And if you guys are interested in seeing any like templates or ways to reach out through different congressional websites and things like that to these speakers, to have them speak at your high school, you should know that they are really interested in that. I've hosted like an event like that at my high school, and most congressional representatives, if they have the time, they definitely do want to speak to students. So we can share email templates, ways to ways to complete that outreach and things like that to help you guys out in the next meeting. But does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask Eric?
I just got private chatted a question actually, so I'll just ask it out loud on behalf of the member. They were asking, as a PAC, what do you think the importance is of coalition building and working with other organizations to better achieve goals?
That is a fantastic question because that is so important, especially as a youth-led organization and a smaller organization, and you know all the things that we talked about when it comes to resources. There are so much more well-resourced organizations out there who have been doing this work for years, and who have been doing community organizing and who are like such valuable partners. At the end of this month, for example, we're getting honor by one of our partners called California Voters Innovations on like climate advocacy, but they're honoring us and uplifting the fact that we are a youth-led organization in front of all of their donors and some of their biggest supporters, right? So creating those partnerships is a huge fundraising piece, which is kind of what I specialize in, right? But it's also just important in building coalitions for candidates. We sit as a member of several kind of different coalitions. I mentioned the Working Families Party before. We're a member of their statewide steering committee. So any endorsements that the California Working Families Party makes, we're involved in those decisions, and they value our voice at the table. They're doing a big California Working Families Party convention at the end of the month in San Francisco, and so we're doing like a youth organizing panel. And they went out of their way to say, we want to celebrate and uplift you at this retreat that we're having, and make sure that everyone who's there has the opportunity to hear from you all, as well as other young organizers that are a part of Working Families Party. So finding groups like that who are willing to invest in you. We're also a member of, it's called the Progressive Endorser Table in California, and it's basically a bunch of different organizations who get involved in politics. It's groups like Enviro Voters, it's groups like Working Families Party, and then it's like abortion rights groups, groups like Emily's List, groups like that are focused on climate, housing, a bunch of different things, and it's Quality California, focused on LGBTQ rights. All these groups come together and we compare notes on candidates to support, and how we're existingly, doing the work to help elect them. If we're hosting a canvas next week, we tell all them and they'll be like, oh, well, easy. We'll just send our members since you're already kind of doing the hosting work, or vice versa. When they have an event, we can just send young people versus having to reinvent the wheel and completely organize our own new event. So working in coalitions and building allied organizations is super important for fundraising. But as a small, youth-led organization, it's important because so many of these people have relationships and existing experience doing this work for so long. Like, they have so much good advice, they have so much experience doing it, and I am always learning from our partners and really value those relationships that we do have, because it helps us grow as an organization. It helps young people get exposure to all of the different organizations that are out there, and to meet these people and also see what a career in politics could look like as they get towards graduation, right? A lot of these other organizations have full-time staff, whereas as Project SuperBloom, we're all part-time, students or kind of recent graduates. And so it's like, you can kind of see from those partners kind of what the long-term work looks like in doing kind of political organizing. So I really value our partnerships and couldn't, say enough about how important it is to build them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes especially as like all these different organizations, it's easy to kind of get caught up in like individual goals for the organization. But in the end, it's important to remember how we all have our different strengths and weaknesses. And if we were able to kind of link together, we could create essentially an unstoppable force, especially when it comes to the youth movement in politics.
Exactly.
So yeah, thank you so much for answering that question and speaking on that. Is there anyone else who has any questions? If you want to like chat them or something like that, if you're too nervous to like speak up, that's totally fine too. Okay, if not, then thank you to everyone who, had any questions, and I'll pass it back to Evelyn and Zion to kind of wrap up the meeting.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Ashi, for that. But what we're going to go over today is just a few last updates. So thank you so much, Eric, for speaking to all of our fellows. This meeting will also be published on YouTube for anyone who wasn't able to make it. But just for some final updates, next meeting will be actually our last meeting. So sorry, not next week, but the week after next week. So if you guys are able to hop onto that, that'd be absolutely awesome. We'll also be emailing out the certificates during that meeting. So if you came to all of our meetings, you'll get one as a distinguished fellow. If not, you'll just get a certificate of completion. But we have those complete, so we're looking forward to seeing you guys all then. But just for some HSDA updates, not anything too big, but HSDA Academy recently launched. I believe I mentioned this last week, but if you go into the HSDA channel, look at the general channel, our programs director did put in a message for that. If any of you guys are interested in that program, truthfully, I don't know 100% what the itinerary is, but if you guys want to look at that, I'm sure it's a great opportunity. And also we're having Summit upcoming. So that will only have about anywhere from 50 to 100 HSDA members. And the cost is about $500, but you can apply for a need-based scholarship. So if you're interested in going to Summit, I would definitely say apply for a scholarship as soon as possible. I know that anyone would love to see you there. And for our last meeting, we'll just be covering a few ways in terms of networking and any additional opportunities to go forward and ways to frame this fellowship and different programs on your LinkedIn, on your resume, and things like that. But I'll pass it on to Zion for any additional updates.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a special thanks to Eric again for taking the time to come and speak to our fellows again. It was really inspiring to see your work, and I know that you're also like the co-founder of Project SuperBloom, and to see like, your perspective of building up Project SuperBloom and getting to see the inside works of like pushing for more progressive policy and advocating for youth rights is definitely really inspiring, especially for the youth here. Guys, it's super important to go out and make sure that your voices are heard, because that's the only way that we can get legislation or meaningful legislation passed. That is, that stands for the stuff that we're fighting for. But yeah, I just wanted to thank Eric again for taking the time form in the chat just so that I can get attendance for everyone that has come today. Actually, I'm just going to download the attendance list from here instead. So you guys are actually all free to go. So thank you again. And remember to come to our last meeting from 2 weeks from now. Okay. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.